Hello and welcome to the Stories of Generation Growth, a new series from changemakers featuring high-growth firms from the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses alumni. I'm Michael Hayman, and throughout this series I'll be joined by my guest, Charlotte Keenan, the programme's head. Together we will speak with business leaders who could well be at the heart of a new generation of growth for the UK. But what is generation growth? Well, it's an idea driven by the Small Business Manifesto, a call to action which shares insights and policy ideas on how we can release the potential of high-growth companies to thrive. We'll be discussing the key recommendations of that manifesto and how we make them real. To do it, we're joined today by Roni Savage, founder and managing director of Jomas Associates, a leading environmental and engineering consultancy. Charlotte, Roni, welcome to Changemakers. Absolute pleasure to see you both and to have you on the show. Roni, tell us about Jomas Associates, a really, really cool business on the 10,000 Small Businesses programme. You founded it. Tell us all about it.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I started Jomas in 2009, 15 years ago this year. Feels like yesterday. I graduated from university with a degree in engineering geology. I worked for small, medium and large size engineering companies across the country. And in 2009, I made that brave decision to start an engineering practice on my own, serving the construction industry from my kitchen table. Yeah. And 15 years later, I'm here.
Do you remember what that felt like? I mean, presumably you were taking a risk. You were having to do something completely new. Did you feel any trepidation, or did you feel like I can nail this?
Do you know, it's interesting because I didn't overthink it. And I think that's what helped at the start, because I didn't overthink it. I wasn't sort of aiming for multi-millions from day one. I just wanted to deliver a good service to the construction industry. I'm a geologist. We're working in the ground on construction projects. I just wanted to do a couple of projects and deliver that. And I also had 2 young children. So my focus was very much sort of being around for the boys and earning a little bit of a wage. Well,
let's come back to some of the sort of, I suppose, the consequences of that in terms of building the business. But Charlotte, you've known Roni on the programme over the years. Give us a sense of your perspective in terms of Roni and her journey.
Yeah, Roni is. Roni, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. So, to give you some context, Michael, with 10,000 small businesses, we have around 2,500 alumni across the country. Mm-hmm. And every time I need an opinion, advice, help, I call Roni. Because
that's a pretty good compliment.
The first thing that I would say about Roni is that she is an absolute can do, will do, make it happen individual. And so I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed getting to know and learn about you is that you're in the construction industry, which is a difficult, challenging industry. You're a female leader. You're a Black female leader. You're a mum. You launched your business, as you just said, and I'm interested, you launched it in 2009, which was a hugely uncertain, difficult period in the UK. And I'd also be curious, Roni, and your reflections of launching a business in a time of uncertainty and lessons that you would share from that experience.
What would you tell yourself back then, knowing what you know now?
To be fair, the only way then was up. Businesses were crashing, closing down, making people redundant. And for me, at that point, the only way was up, because I had a very sort of niche offering in terms of the work that we did on the ground engineering front. And I wanted to deliver a really high quality service. So, the focus was very much on that purpose, on delivering a really good quality service.
So you're an optimist.
I am an optimist, and the only way was up.
Right, yes, right. But also, how did you feel when you heard Charlotte sort of like reflections of you as your character and I suppose your challenges? I mean, are these actually the superpowers that make you who you are?
Superpowers. I don't know about superpowers. What I do know is that I ran my business for a number of years, and in 2017 I built the business to a certain size and decided to embark on, I was recommended to the 10KSP program, and it did transform me and my mindset. So it's pleasing to hear Charlotte describe me in the way that she did.
Yeah,
she did.
Call Roni might become a new business idea from this podcast, I think. But let's talk about about the journey, if you will. I mean, how many people work with you today? What's tell us a little bit about where the business is.
About 25 full-time,
right.
and probably another sort of 35, 40 that I count on.
Right, and on that kind of access to talent, I mean, it was raised in the Generation Growth Small Business Manifesto as the number one issue that growth businesses were facing. How's that played out for you in terms of the relationship between building a team and building success?
It's hard. I mean, you go from running a business on your own to relying on people and wanting to maintain a level of quality. Because as I said before, my business was founded on quality, and I wanted to maintain that as we grew. And that's hard when you're sort of bringing people in to fit into the business. So what I've done, and what I've done over a number of years, is I train from within. So you're
like almost like an academy.
Precise, almost, yeah.
Well, you are, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I run a graduate training program, and I train from within. So that works really well for us. And I've got people who have worked with me for 9-10 years through that program, and they've stuck around.
Right. I mean, this issue of access to talent, skills for the future, Charlotte. I mean, this was a big one in the manifesto, wasn't it?
Well, this was the biggest one in the manifesto. And when we asked our businesses to identify the key challenges that they were facing, number one is access to talent and access to skills. And, I think 55% said that they couldn't find the skills and talent that they need for their business. And then a really depressing stat that, only 12% think the UK education system is fit for purpose in terms of providing those core skills. So I guess, Roni, I'm curious, when you're looking at people for your graduate training program, if you're training them in-house, it's not their background in construction that you're recruiting them on, but what are the skills, aptitudes? What do you look for when you recruit someone?
I mean, when you take on a graduate, they haven't got the expertise and the experience. I mean, they've been through university for 3 or 4 years, but they don't tick all the boxes. So it's a culture fit.
Right.
That's
So you're hiring for attitude.
That's the focus. Right. Will they fit? Will they understand the values? And it's sort of drilling into that, and that's that we run. When I've spoken about this before, we run psychometric tests when we're hiring to determine whether they will fit into the business, and then you can train them up.
I think I just want to come back to the values point, right? Because I think that's really fundamental, and we spend a lot of time with our small businesses encouraging them to think about the values framework from the outset, because it's much easier to think about it at the beginning than as the business grows. So, Roni, how did that process work for you? What are the values of your business, and how did you bring about that culture and maintain that culture?
So, I mean, we have a very, very strong vision statement, which is focused on quality, on people, on customer service, on delivery, and bringing people into the business and training them to have those skills, to focus on solution finding, for instance, rather than problems. It is tough. It is tough, and you almost feel very much as.
But it sounds like you can be quite proactive here, though. But you've done. I mean, a lot of it strikes me that a lot of small firms would see themselves as well, we're going to be victims in this because of all these big sort of like headwinds that are difficult to solve. But I guess if you've got culture, if you've got vision, if you've got the in-house commitment to sort of take people to the next level, that's something I guess that other small firms can think about.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say this: it's a solution-finding mindset. Yeah. And once you focus on that, you're constantly thinking, how can I resolve that issue? So every problem that we're facing, it's finding that solution. Right. And there is always a solution. But I am an engineer, so
there is a formula.
Yeah, there is always a solution. Make your own formula if there isn't one. But yeah.
So I think, very interesting points that you raise, because quite often we think about the entrepreneurial journey as jumping from success to success, but of course it's much more dramatic than that. And of course that startup story, the reason to do it, is often at the heart of the drama. Why did you do it? How did you feel the sort of, I suppose, also the empowerment to be able to do it?
So, I mean, I worked for one of the largest engineering companies at the time, and I had 2 very young children. And I was away a lot. And I was leaving home very early in the morning, and it didn't quite work out in the way that I wanted to be there for my children. So starting off on my own with the purpose, obviously, of delivering a service to the construction industry, I just felt that it worked better for me to do that from home.
Did you consider going to another large company?
No, I'd worked for two.
You'd worked for two, so it was time to do something completely different.
But I wanted an opportunity that enabled me to be at home. We didn't have the sort of working from home in the way that we do now. I mean, my boys were, it's 2009, my boys were 6 and 3, so very young.
But if you go back to 2009, startup formations were falling off a cliff. We were in the teeth of the financial crisis. There were so many things that would put off a lot of people for going into it. But you've decided to go for it. Tell us why you felt you got what it took.
I do think the best businesses are started in a recession, because you see an opportunity. There is always an opportunity out there, and you don't need that much when you're starting off. Your costs are fairly minimal. But I am the ever optimist,
and
the
contrarian, right?
And the optimist, but I think what you're touching on is for often, and I'm aware that I'm generalising, but for a female starting a business, there are many more factors at play than just the pure business itself. And it sounds as though for you, it was driven by, obviously, care, being with your children, being there when they come home from school, and having that flexibility, which the corporate workplace at the time didn't enable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's interesting to go back to 2009, because although we might commonly assume that those objectives can be fulfilled in 2024, back in 2009, most people's view about entrepreneurship was it's risky, it's a sort of thing that you see on the TV, it's not for me. It wasn't seen as a pathway in quite the same way that we've gone on to then experience it. So in terms of your mindset, when you think about the kind of the go for it type, I suppose, attitude that you had, can you sum up the sort of like the feelings of, was there doubt? Was there sort of, you always knew you were going to do it?
I just did it. Did it. I didn't overthink it.
So just do it.
I just did it.
So it sounds like a Nike ad, but just do it, right? I guess.
Look, I'd worked in industry. I was an associate director at a large practice. If it didn't work, and I spent a number of years with my children, I could always go back. So I didn't overthink it. I just did it, and I did. To be fair, I have a lot of encouragement from past bosses. So they knew I could do it. I was encouraged to do it. I knew that worst case scenario, I'd have a job to go back to. So I didn't feel like I was taking that much of a risk, where for others, they might do.
So fear of failure is a major, I think, sort of part of the intel chip inside an entrepreneur, that it keeps them focused, it keeps them going. But fear can also be a profoundly negative emotion. How have you sort of like worked with it in your career?
I mean, fear of failure can hold you back if that's very much your focus. But if your focus is on, I need to move forward, I just need to find solutions, then that just propels you forward and keeps you going. So in my mind, failure isn't an option. It's just, but I just feel things may not necessarily go according to plan, but then you find a solution and you keep going. Things haven't always gone according to plan, but it's just that momentum to keep going.
What's the advice you'd give listeners? I mean, I sometimes think that people have got techniques. I mean, there's a famous Eminem song with too many expletives which says success is my only option. I mean, that often is how an entrepreneur thinks, well, actually, I burnt the boats, I've got to go forward. Success is what it's all about. But in terms of the loneliest moments, the most difficult moments where you've had to dig really deep, how have you coped? What's the lesson you'd share with others?
Mindset. It's just the mindset. My mindset is very much focused on what I'm trying to achieve and how I get there, rather than what's holding me back. I don't spend very much time thinking about what's holding me back. And that would be my advice, is that you just focus on the solutions. There will be hurdles and bumps, but how do I move forward? How do I keep
like an athlete.
Yeah, precisely.
So to paint a picture, right, week 1, you've walked away from your engineering career and you're sitting at home or in an office, and what do you do? What have you achieved in week one?
I mean, I picked up the phone and I called people and I sold my business and I sold my proposition. I didn't even call it a value proposition at the time, but clearly it was. Goldman Sachs taught me what that was. But, I sold my proposition and I wasn't afraid to let people know that I was offering this service. But very much, I built a business based on a purpose, based on quality. It wasn't based on, I want to make a load of money. It was, this is what I have to offer the industry. I just don't have time to be scared.
Yeah, but I suppose actually I'm going to go down another line, because so we mentioned the athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great athletes need great coaches, right? And there was a point in time where presumably you thought, I need to learn more to be more.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that moment where you thought, well, actually, I'm going to need to go outside the four walls of my office to actually learn more about who I might be.
I'm going to tell you a quick one, because you have hurdles all the time, and I still do. But I started off this business very much from my kitchen table, wanting to be with the kids, and then it grew and it grew and it grew. And I thought, actually, I need to recruit and the rest of it. But actually, interestingly enough, I ended up having a third child. So that derailed me somewhat because it wasn't in the plan. But it just goes to show that sometimes you have plans and it gets derailed, and you just got to think, how do I resolve this and how do I continue to move forward?
I think the issue is that these life-changing moments have created life-changing decisions, actually. And I suppose how you balance and square a very difficult circle is I guess what you've gone out to seek answers for.
Absolutely. I took my child in a car with me for site visits and carried my mother along. You find a way around it. There will be hurdles, and it's just how what are the solutions? How can I get around it? And it's just that mindset. And I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and they talk about the challenges, and we all have challenges, but it's very much, how do I resolve this issue in front of me?
Well, what's the formula for funding your business? I mean, how have you found the sort of the journey in terms of the balance sheet and how you keep it on the move and keep it successful?
Yeah, I have to stay humble with that question. I come from a family of accountants, so right. I keep my eyes very much on the numbers. So we've been really good with regards to our profits, our cash management.
As opposed to top-line revenue.
I've invested and built the business and kept
what do they say?
Profits.
Turnover for show, profit for dough.
Absolutely.
Is that your...
Turnover is vanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so profit is sanity. But both go hand in hand. But it's making sure that I can reinvest some of those profits in the business.
And have you self-funded?
I have self-funded so far.
Is that a common experience in the programme, Charlotte, in terms of self-funding your way through, bootstrapping until you grow, or is there a mix in terms of how people have funded that growth journey?
It's a very common trait. Now, one of the things that the program does is that we encourage businesses to actually think about bringing in more external finance and getting on board that growth finance, and really, ensuring that you're ready to take on finance when you don't need it, because then you're in the strongest position to accept, the best type of finance and the best terms for your business. But we do see, I think that the natural inclination of entrepreneurs is that they are risk averse. They want control. We particularly see it actually with businesses coming out of the financial crisis and that period. So it's a kind of a natural correlation, Roni, that you started your business in that time. You know what it looks like to run a business during a time of severe stress.
Yeah.
And we also see it as a more common trait amongst female leaders.
Yeah.
Again, I think kind of wanting that control and certainty. But of course, one of the things that we encourage with the program is, we are a growth program and we want your businesses to be bigger.
It's an interesting observation, that, because I'm one of two co-founders of a business where we've self-funded our own journey. And I sometimes do think about, well, were we too risk averse on accepting investment and finance? And we've been very, I'd say, Roni, very sort of similar travellers on the road. Do you ever turn around and think, well, actually, I might have done this differently, or I might have had a different attitude towards this area?
I think you've taken external funding when the time is right. And I do think that, especially being on the Goldman Sachs program, I'm thinking a lot bigger and planning a lot further ahead than I did, say, before the program. So at some point I will take investment, but it's going to be a different time. The time it will be right for me will be different from the time when it's right for others. And for others, it might be right from the start. And for me, it's now that I'm looking at acquisitions. So it's a different time for everybody.
I can remember a previous 10,000 Small Business event where one of the speakers, Eric Collins, said the best time to take investment is when you don't need it, which is, I guess, something to think about. Let's move on, because one thing I was thinking about with a business like yours, where you're in this kind of like this world which is quite physical, it's looking at things from a particular vantage point. How do the sort of like the issues like technology and artificial intelligence and all these kind of new disruptive waves that are affecting businesses across the piece, how does it affect your business?
I'm really excited about AI.
Right.
I mean, I know there is a lot of trepidation out there because, I can see what the cons are, but I very much focus on what the pros could be. And we all use AI for our businesses. It's not quite ready yet, but I'm thinking into the future and what we could do with it. So I'm definitely optimistic about AI.
Have you got, bring it to life for us. How might it affect your business, do you think?
I'm working on construction projects. We're not going to be building people's homes and offices using AI. The physical element of that will not be removed. I don't see how that will be removed by AI, but I certainly think some elements of design. Gathering information through AI is just phenomenal. Getting data that's out there rather than just doing the searches yourself. You just type a question into a chat GPT or other, and the information is out there. So I just think, that is the way forward. I'm big on tech, so. I run Jomas, but looking at a tech business is something that I'm quite excited about at the moment. But actually using AI for that, the ability to be able to type a question into a system that I've built and pull up information, I think is the future.
So that's a mindset issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very common that we see with, I think, the majority of our businesses are thinking about it in this way. And I think describing it in exactly the same way that you have, that, I'm guessing, Roni, that no one's kind of sat down and given you an AI masterclass. We are doing that now with our alumni, but it sounds like you figured it out yourself. You worked out how it is smart and linked to the business and how it can, increase productivity, increase efficiency, save time. I think the bigger piece that we need to do is, you talked about ChatGPT, beyond that, what are the AI tools that you'd be looking at? How do you use them? And also, how do you ensure that you have the talent within your business, right, and the skill set of people to know how to adopt and integrate AI within the business?
I guess the sort of biggest concern I've got at the moment, but I know that AI is still evolving, the biggest concern I've got at the moment is making sure that what you'll get, the output, is correct.
Yeah.
And at the moment,
you get some fairly ropey answers.
At the moment, it isn't. So
what I love is the honesty of ChatGPT, right? Because you do say, "Is that true?" And it goes, "I've thought about this, and you are correct. This answer wasn't correct." So I think there is an element of learning as you go. But there is something about the entrepreneur and gut instinct, and that actually these are the tools of the future, and actually there's a first mover advantage. And I suppose if that's the mindset point, what about the infrastructure around you, the digital infrastructure, the UK as a place to grow a great business? How do you rate that?
It's certainly improved since I established the business 15 years ago, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
What's got better, do you think?
The fact that we've got broadband that works now that didn't work.
It's a fairly low bar, Roni.
Sorry, we've got broadband that works. But I'm still, to be fair, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still, broadband isn't all over the UK. And, for those of us who live in London, you think, we've got pretty good broadband generally, not all the time. Yeah. But actually in rural areas, it's not quite right. The fact that I don't have broadband on the underground. There is still a lot of work to be done to ensure that we've got that sort of digital infrastructure across the country.
It's because it's one of the things that the report brought out, Charlotte, was this idea about, what small business needs and what it needs from the nation and what the nation needs to deliver for it to be successful. Of course, these are the sorts of things that come down to, I mean, the essential plumbing, right? You know, do we need to sort of get a bit more serious about making sure that we provide this kind of world-class infrastructure?
Absolutely. Because you'd be forgiven by thinking with the political debate, it was all about physical infrastructure and it's all about high-speed trains, etc. But this digital infrastructure point, which our businesses have said loud and clear, it's really, really, really important. And it's kind of, we can't be talking about leaps and bounds in AI if you can't even get on the train and use Wi-Fi as you're traveling across the country. And then I think when we look at this with our international peers, the UK absolutely needs to invest and focus on the digital prioritization.
Even in a major global city like London, I mean, you see the beautiful backdrop behind us, but there are still not spots, they're called, areas which are, resolutely free of the digital world. I mean, I guess it's a big issue. Another big issue, though, I suppose, is climate and, the sort of the transitioning towards more sustainable business models. I mean, is that part of how your business has grown, do you think? I mean, how has a big issue like climate affected the way you think about growing your own firm?
I mean, I'm an engineering/environmental consultant.
Yeah.
My work, my day-to-day work is reclaiming brownfield sites and bringing sites that are derelict to good use. So essentially, it's enabling
but does that
a more
affect
sustainable.
The practice?
Developing a more sustainable future. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I think it's the responsible thing to do. If we're focusing on just today and us today, then obviously that's not important. But we've got to think about future generations and creating a sustainable environment for them to live in. So it's the responsible thing to do.
So I think the thing is, that's the day job, but there's also the practices of growing the company. How do you embed it into the business? I mean, beyond saying, well, actually, we're helping pull brownfield sites back into the beauty of use and being sustainable and so on. How do you actually build a sustainable business with practices that are, I suppose, respectful and contributive to the climate?
I think that the first thing and the easy thing to do is to think about all of your processes. And it's very simple things from just switching the lights off, car sharing when you can. And it's just embedding that into your day-to-day decision making. And those are the easy wins in terms of sort of longer term. And there are controversial discussions that we can have around this. But in terms of sort of longer term and as a business, obviously what you'd like to be able to be, you'd like to be in a position where you're aiming towards net zero at net zero cost. And that's where I'd expect most SMEs, most small businesses would want to be able to get to.
I mean, I've interviewed a really excellent academic who's spoken about, just the effect of turning the lights off on the climate debate is dramatic, actually. But I guess the sustainable business model, Charlotte, is the future, right? In terms of actually future generations of this program. I mean, that will be a quality and a commitment that presumably you would look to see ever more present in cohorts of the future.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, in the 15 years that we've been teaching this program, I mean, it's evolved enormously. I remember our very first modules that we taught on sustainability, versus where we are now and how businesses are thinking about it and how we're encouraging businesses to think about it. But I think as Roni says, yes, net zero is a grand ambition, and 70% of our businesses don't think the UK is being ambitious enough in getting there. But it starts with small steps. I think another point to bring in here, right, is also that generational piece. And you'll see the graduates coming in and, it's not acceptable to leave the lights on. It's not acceptable not to recycle. It's not acceptable, to not to car share, etc. So I think that change is coming through. But I think being very specific, it's a big topic. And I think, there is the danger that small businesses don't really think or understand how it relates to them or kind of know what they can do.
I think that's a good observation, actually. Now, unfortunately, our time is almost up, but I don't want to finish before I take you back to your early days in growing up with accountants, because I want to talk about tax. In terms of a final thought about the UK as a great place to grow a business, do you think that the current incentives for you help you to drive growth? I fear I'm going to get a politician's answer here.
Yes, potentially. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question at this point of my career, because I sit on the SME Business Council, advising the government on initiatives required to help SMEs grow and thrive. And we are having conversations around tax is one of them. So those conversations are ongoing. There is still a lot to be done, hence why you're probably getting a political response. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done. There is a lot of streamlining that needs to be done. There's better communication that's required. And I think at the moment, interestingly enough, I was looking at some of the stats, and just last year, there's 900,000 new businesses incorporated in the UK, and only 8% of those will last over the next 5 years. So it's incredible that there is such an ambition in our country, but these companies don't survive for a very long period of time. So clearly, there are issues. And I do think that the system as it is one of them.
Roni, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining me on Changemakers.
Thank you for having us.